One bed, one rule, don't sleep in clothes, no falling in love. Alien girl. Eli Rowan did not expect his biggest problem on a deep space research station to be a bed. He had trained for 5 years to work with alien species. He had learned 23 non-human languages, survived zero-gravity panic drills, and passed psychological exams designed to test patience, empathy, and emotional control. None of those exams mentioned what to do when the station assigned you one room, one bed, and one alien girl who looked at emotions the way humans looked at radiation leaks. The problem started with a system failure. The station's housing wing had been damaged during a routine power reroute. Most rooms were sealed for safety checks. Only a few living units were left usable, and assignments were made quickly, without much discussion. Eli accepted the notice on his wrist screen without thinking much of it. Temporary housing, shared unit, standard procedure during emergencies. That was before the door slid open. Valith was already inside. She stood near the far wall, perfectly still, her posture straight and careful, like someone afraid the room itself might react if she moved too fast. Her skin had a faint silver-blue tone that reflected the soft lights, and her eyes were darker than space beyond the windows. She wore the simple research uniform of her species, smooth fabric with no loose edges. Everything about her looked controlled. Her gaze shifted to the center of the room, to the bed. There was only one. Silence filled the space, heavy and uncomfortable. The station systems hummed quietly, unaware they had just created a social disaster. Eli cleared his throat. "Looks like we're sharing," he said, trying to sound calm, professional, normal. Valith turned to him slowly. Her expression did not change, but something tightened in her shoulders. "This arrangement is unacceptable." "I agree," Eli said quickly, "but it should be temporary. I'll request a reassignment." She raised a hand, palm outward. "That will not be necessary," he paused. "You're okay with it?" "No," she said, "but rules will be established." That should have been his warning. Valith stepped closer, stopping well short of him. "My species has strict guidelines regarding proximity and emotional exposure. Humans are considered high risk." Eli blinked. "High risk how?" "You bond easily," she said, "without structure, without safeguards." He almost laughed, but stopped when he saw she was completely serious. "I propose 2 rules," Valith continued. "First, we do not sleep close. Physical distance must be maintained at all rest cycles." "That sounds reasonable," Eli said. "Second," she said, eyes locking onto his, "no emotional attachment." The words felt heavier than they should have. Eli nodded slowly. "I can do that." Valith studied him, clearly expecting resistance. When none came, she seemed slightly unsettled. "Then we will coexist," she said. They spent the first cycle reorganizing the room. Eli took the floor, using spare thermal padding. Valith remained near the bed, though she positioned herself on the far edge, leaving as much space between them as possible. The distance felt measured, deliberate. When the lights dimmed, Eli lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. "So," he said carefully, "if you don't mind me asking, why are humans high risk?" Valith was silent for several seconds. "Because your emotions adapt instead of overwhelming you," she said. "Most species either suppress bonding or are consumed by it. Humans survive it." "That doesn't sound dangerous," Eli said. "It is," she replied, "because it spreads." That night, neither of them slept much. Over the following days, the routine settled in. They shared the space carefully. Eli made sure to announce his movements so he wouldn't startle her. He adjusted the room's light levels when he noticed her eyes reacted to brightness differently. He learned that her species preferred quiet not because of discomfort, but because silence helped them think clearly. Valith noticed things too. She noticed that Eli spoke gently even when tired, that he listened more than he talked, that he respected her boundaries without complaint, without resentment. Humans, according to her people's data, were emotional, impulsive, and reckless. Eli did not match those descriptions. At night they talked, always from a distance, always careful. Eli told her about Earth, about how humans looked up at the stars long before they could reach them, about loneliness and hope, and how the idea of not being alone in the universe had once been enough to drive generations forward. Valith listened, quiet and attentive. She told him about her species' fear of emotional collapse, about ancestors who bonded too deeply and lost focus, identity, purpose. Her people had survived by building rules, limits, and distance. "The rules keep us whole," she said. Eli did not argue. "Sometimes rules do that," he said. Sometimes they just keep us from finding out who we could be. That night, Valeth lay awake longer than usual. She began to notice changes, not dramatic ones, small ones. Her thoughts felt clearer. Conversations with Eli left her mind active, not drained. She found herself thinking about ideas outside her research parameters. Curiosity replaced caution more often than she liked. This was not supposed to happen. On the fifth night, the station experienced a power outage. The lights shut off. The temperature controls failed. Cold crept into the room quickly, sharp and uncomfortable. Eli sat up immediately. "Are you okay?" Valeth's breath fogged in the dim emergency glow. "My species is sensitive to low temperatures." He reached for a thermal blanket, then froze. Sharing body warmth would break Rule 1. Eli placed the blanket on the floor between them instead. "You can take this," he said, turning away to give her privacy. "I'll be fine." She hesitated. The room grew colder. Valeth made a decision she had not planned for. She moved closer, not touching, not crossing the final distance, just enough to feel the warmth through the air between them. Eli stayed still. He did not turn, he did not comment. For a long moment they sat in silence. The station power returned slowly. Lights flickered back on. Warmth returned. Valeth did not move away immediately. When she finally did, she realized something that made her chest feel tight. The bond had not started with touch, it had started with choice. And that was far more dangerous than she had ever been taught. Eli woke before the station lights shifted to morning mode. The room felt different. Nothing had moved. The bed was still where it always was. Valeth lay on her side of it, facing the far wall, her breathing slow and steady. Yet the space between them no longer felt empty. It felt aware, like something unseen had settled there quietly and refused to leave. Eli sat up slowly, careful not to disturb her. He told himself it was just exhaustion. Shared space did strange things to the mind. That was all. But when Valeth opened her eyes a moment later, she did not look surprised to see him awake. "You did not sleep well," she said. "Neither did you," Eli replied. She considered that, then sat up, keeping the familiar distance. "Station Command has released an update." He waited. "Repairs will be completed within 2 cycles," she said. "After that, shared housing will no longer be necessary." Eli nodded. "That's good news." Valeth studied his face as if looking for something hidden. "Yes, it is." The day passed more slowly than the ones before it. They returned to work, but their focus slipped. Eli misread a translation he would normally catch. Valeth stared at data longer than required, rereading lines that no longer held meaning. When they crossed paths in the corridor, they paused, exchanged polite words, then moved on. Distance, Eli thought, should feel like relief. It didn't. That night, Valeth spoke first. "I have been reviewing human emotional research." Eli glanced up from his console. "That sounds dangerous." "It is confusing," she corrected. "Humans define bonding as both strength and vulnerability. This contradiction should cause instability." "Does it?" he asked. "No," she admitted. "That is the problem." She turned toward him, eyes reflective. "My species believes emotional attachment reduces function, but my recent performance has improved." Eli said nothing. "I am more focused," she continued, "more aware. I process information faster after speaking with you." "That doesn't sound like damage," he said gently. Valeth looked away. "It contradicts everything I was taught." The following cycle, Station Command sent a message directly to her console. Her people had noticed the delay in reassignment. They requested immediate transfer. Valeth read the message 3 times. When she told Eli, she expected relief in his voice. Agreement. Support. Instead, he said, "What do you want to do?" The question unsettled her. "I am not supposed to want," she said. "I am supposed to comply." Eli leaned back. "Humans do a lot of damage by confusing those 2 things." She studied him. "You are not asking me to stay." "No," he said. "That wouldn't be fair." That night, the distance between the bed and the floor felt wider than ever. Valeth lay awake, thoughts racing. She reviewed data, memories, conversations. She examined her own mind like a scientist facing unexpected results. The bond, if that was what it was, had not erased her identity. It had sharpened it. Her people were wrong, or incomplete. On the final night before reassignment, the station lights dimmed earlier than usual. Maintenance cycles hummed softly. Outside the window, stars drifted in silence. Valeth spoke into the quiet. "The rules failed." Eli did not respond immediately. "Which ones?" "All of them," she said. "We did not sleep close, we did not touch, and yet," he echoed. I feel connected, she said. Not consumed, not unstable, connected. Eli turned toward her. He stayed where he was. So do I. They sat like that for a long time. I followed the rules, he continued. Because you asked me to, but they didn't protect us from feeling. They just made us honest about it. Valith let out a slow breath. If I leave now, my people will classify this experience as a failure, as a warning. And if you stay, he asked, they will have to listen, she said quietly, even if they do not wish to. The next morning, Valith did not board the transfer shuttle. Instead, she stood before the station council, calm and steady. Eli sat in the observation area, hands clasped, heart pounding harder than he liked to admit. Valith presented her findings clearly. No emotion. No accusation, just evidence. Her cognitive output had increased. Emotional stability remained intact. Identity markers showed no loss. Human proximity, rather than destabilizing her, had acted as a regulator. Humans bond, she said, but they do not disappear within it. They adapt, they expand. The council members exchanged glances. This contradicts established doctrine, one said. Doctrine is not data, Valith replied. The request for reassignment was suspended. New research protocols were approved. Humans were reclassified, not as hazards, but as stabilizers. When the decision was announced, Eli felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, pride, something warmer than both. They received new living assignments that evening. Separate rooms, larger, more comfortable, each with its own bed. Valith stood in the doorway of her new quarters, then turned back to look at Eli. We are no longer required to share space. I know, he said. She hesitated. Would you like to sit for a while? Eli smiled. I'd like that. They sat together, not because of necessity, not because of failure, but because they chose to. And for the first time, no rules were needed at all. Eli did not expect silence to become comfortable so quickly. The new quarters were quiet in a different way. Before, silence had been careful, measured, full of rules and unspoken thoughts. Now it felt open, optional, something they stepped into rather than endured. Valith sat on the edge of the seating platform in Eli's room, her posture relaxed in a way he had not seen before. The lighting was softer here, adjusted automatically for mixed-species comfort. The space no longer forced distance, but it did not demand closeness either. That choice mattered. I am still here, Valith said, as if confirming it to herself. Eli nodded. You made a big decision. So did you, she replied. He frowned slightly. I didn't do anything. You stayed, she said, without asking me to, without trying to influence the outcome. Humans, she had learned, often revealed their values most clearly in what they refused to do. The station changed around them in subtle ways over the next few cycles. New research teams arrived. Mixed-species collaboration increased. Humans were no longer given additional restrictions during emotional proximity trials. Instead, they were assigned as partners, mediators, observers. Emotional stabilizers, Eli said one morning, reading the updated classification. Valith watched his reaction carefully. Does that trouble you? He smiled faintly. A little makes us sound like equipment. Your species often becomes what others need, she said, without intending to. That observation stayed with him. They continued to meet each evening, sometimes in his quarters, sometimes in hers, sometimes in shared observation lounges overlooking the stars. There were no rules now, no official boundaries, only mutual awareness, and still they did not rush. Valith found herself fascinated by how humans treated time in relationships. There was patience, yes, but also acceptance. No pressure to define everything immediately, no demand for certainty before connection. For her people, bonding was an event. For humans, it was a process. That difference changed everything. One cycle, Valith received a message from her home council, not a command, a request. They wanted clarification, more data. They wanted to understand what she had experienced without triggering collapse. They wanted to know how identity could remain intact while emotional attachment grew. Valith stared at the message for a long time. When she told Eli, he waited for her to finish before speaking. What do you want to say to them? I want to tell the truth, she said. But I do not yet have the words. Eli leaned back, eyes on the stars beyond the window. Humans didn't either once, we just kept talking until we found them. She considered that. They worked together on the response, not as scientist and subject, not as human and alien, but as two people trying to explain something larger than either of them. They wrote about trust, about choice, about how closeness did not erase individuality but revealed it. how emotional connection could exist without ownership, how humans survived feeling deeply because they allowed feelings to change them without defining them completely. Valith added her own perspective. She described the fear her species carried, how it had once been necessary, how it had become a cage without anyone noticing. When the message was sent, neither of them knew what the response would be. They did not rush to fill the waiting time. Instead, they lived. They shared meals, stories, silence. Eli showed her old Earth music, soft and imperfect. Valith introduced him to visual thought patterns her species used to process complex ideas. They laughed when translations failed. They paused when words became unnecessary. The bond grew, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. One evening, as they sat closer than usual, Valith spoke softly. "I once believed love was a loss of self." Eli did not interrupt. "Now," she continued, "I believe it is a shared expansion." He met her eyes. "That's one of the better definitions I've heard." She hesitated, then reached out, not touching, just close enough that he felt the warmth of her presence. "Is this acceptable?" she asked. Eli smiled. "Only if you want it to be." She did. The reply from her council arrived days later. They did not demand her return. They asked questions, more questions than she had ever seen. The fear was still there, but curiosity had begun to replace it. Change, Valith realized, did not start with agreement. It started with listening. The station director later informed them that a long-term joint research initiative had been approved. Valith would remain. Eli would continue his work. Their collaboration would be formally recognized. Neither of them reacted immediately. After the director left, Eli laughed softly. "So this is what success looks like." Valith smiled, a gesture she had learned from him. "It appears so." That night, for the first time, they shared a bed, not out of necessity, not because of failure, but because they chose closeness without fear. They did not rush. They did not cross boundaries unspoken. They lay side by side, learning the quiet rhythm of shared space without rules pressing down on them. Valith did not feel lost. Eli did not feel overwhelmed. They felt present. In the days that followed, other species began to ask for human partners. Not because humans were perfect, but because they were adaptable. Because they could care deeply without breaking. Because they could sit with uncertainty and not run from it. Humanity did not dominate the station. It softened it. And in that quiet change, something remarkable happened. The galaxy became a little less afraid of connection. Valith often thought back to the first night. One bed, two rules, so much fear. Now there were no rules. Only understanding. Eli noticed the change before anyone announced it. The station felt warmer, not in temperature but in tone. Conversations lasted longer. Shared spaces were used more often. Species that once kept careful distance now paused, observed, and sometimes stayed. Humanity's quiet influence had not spread like a rule or policy. It spread like a habit. Valith noticed it too. She walked beside Eli through the central corridor, her steps no longer measured by fear of proximity. She matched his pace easily now. Where she once tracked distance instinctively, now she tracked comfort. "It is strange," she said. "My people believed connection would weaken us. And instead," Eli asked, "it made us curious again." They stopped at the observation window. Stars drifted past, slow and endless. Valith placed her hand on the glass, a gesture she had copied from humans after learning it meant reflection, not ownership. Messages from her homeworld arrived more often now. They were no longer cautious. They were eager. Requests for human partnership trials. Invitations for cultural exchange. Questions about trust building without hierarchy. Valith answered each one carefully. She did not exaggerate. She did not protect humans from flaws. She explained them honestly. "Humans feel deeply," she wrote. "They fail often. But they recover together. That is their strength." Eli read her drafts sometimes, offering suggestions only when asked. He had learned that support did not mean control. Valith had learned that independence did not mean isolation. Their bond grew stronger not because they clung to it, but because they allowed space inside it. One cycle, the station hosted a multi-species forum. Representatives gathered in the largest hall, seated in loose circles instead of rigid rows. It was an experiment suggested by a human sociologist. Valith stood to speak. She did not present charts this time. She told a story. She spoke of fear mistaken for wisdom, of rules built to survive danger that had long passed, of discovering that connection when chosen freely did not erase identity but sharpened it. She did not mention Eli by name, but when she finished, many eyes turned toward him anyway. After the forum, a delegation approached. They asked questions about humans. Not about technology, about patience, about how humans stayed present during discomfort, how they allowed others to change without demanding it. Eli answered honestly, "We don't always succeed, we just keep trying." That answer surprised them more than anything else. Later that night, Eli and Valeth sat together in her quarters. The lights were low. The room felt lived in now, softened by shared time. "I think my people are changing," Valeth said quietly. "Slowly." "That's usually how real change happens," Eli replied. She turned to him. "You are aware that this began with you sleeping on the floor," he smiled. "I've had worse starts." She laughed, a sound that once would have startled her. The laughter faded into silence, comfortable and easy. Valeth leaned her head against his shoulder. It was still a choice. Always a choice. Months passed. The station became a model for interspecies cooperation. New protocols were written not as restrictions, but as guidelines for consent, communication, and emotional safety. Humans helped design them, not as leaders, but as listeners. Valeth took on a new role, not just researcher, translator, not of language, but of experience. She helped other species understand what humans offered without fear. She also helped humans understand when to slow down, when to step back, when presence mattered more than action. Eli watched her grow into the role with quiet pride. One evening, as they prepared for rest, Valeth paused beside the bed. "There is something I wish to say," she said. Eli waited. "My people once believed love was a threat because it could not be controlled," she said. "I now understand that its value lies precisely there." He met her eyes. "You don't have to define it." "I know," she said softly, "but I want to." She reached for his hand. This time she touched it. The contact was gentle, grounded, real. Nothing broke, nothing was lost. Eli squeezed her hand lightly. "I'm glad you stayed." "So am I," she replied. Outside, the station lights dimmed to night cycle. Species rested side by side across the habitat. Conversations paused, not from fear, but from trust that they could continue tomorrow. Humanity did not change the galaxy by force. It changed it by showing that closeness did not have to mean collapse. And Valeth, once afraid of losing herself, discovered she had never been more whole.